Good morning. Chapter 3 of this book of Vimala Thakar, Exploring Freedom. And chapter 3, or talk number 3, is called Fear and Isolation. In traveling around the world, one sees that huge waves of revolt against the present civilization are breaking on the shores of human consciousness in every country, affluent or poor, theocratic or secular. We are living in one of the most important periods of human history, which seems to be a transitional one. Well, it seems to be certainly true now. This talk was from 1985, I think, so a little bit further along. And what she's speaking about is still very true. For the last 2 centuries, mankind has been busy organizing everything, creating a civilization and culture where the organization of life, knowledge, and leisure is of tremendous importance. Now has come the revolt. After the Industrial Revolution in Europe and the emergence of mass production in agriculture and industry, the trend was to have everything on a mass scale, even thought, emotion, patterns of reaction and behavior. Human beings were reduced to mere passive consumers in a civilization where the creative energies of an individual had little relevance. All this was done in the name of security. In a welfare state, the state looks after everything: production, distribution, education, juvenile delinquency, physical and psychological health, and so on. One lives in a protective atmosphere. If it is a dictatorship, there also the citizen has very little to say. Again, everything is taken care of, not with the consent of the people, as in so-called democracies, but by the force of the bullet. This centralization and organization appealed to mankind for a century or so, but freedom was being lost in the name of security. This deprivation went so far that people started to believe that freedom was something fearful. It had become frightening to stand alone, to think independently for oneself, and to act according to one's understanding. So the revolt has come. This morning we shall consider the meaning of fear and isolation. Why is there fear at all? Why are we afraid to live our own understanding? What is the difference between isolation and solitude? We have already discussed the fact that society is not a tribe or a group, not a herd of human beings crowding together, but has an inner order created by the people with mutual consent. It is society into which we are born. When you live together, there have to be certain restrictions on the physical level. The very living together brings this about. On that level, one has to have laws and regulations and obey them. When Socrates was imprisoned, his friends wanted to help him escape, but he said, "Though I stand for freedom of speech and action, I am still a law-abiding citizen. Were it not so, society could not exist." From this we can understand that the citizen does not succumb to pressure in order to be law-abiding. He is a willing participant in the maintenance of law and order. He voluntarily abides by the laws and cooperates with the collective in creating an atmosphere where all can live freely. He doesn't conform out of fear and isolation. Let us now ask, what is fear? Not the word fear, for the word is not the thing, but what actually happens to the mind and consciousness when one says that one is afraid of something. In a strange country, you would be careful not to eat anything before inquiring about it. You wouldn't drink water in Asia without boiling it. Nor would you walk in jungles where there might be wild animals unless you had the information about them. That instinct of self preservation, which puts you on guard and stimulates caution, is a very healthy feeling, whether the jungle you enter is one of trees or of human beings. Alert and sensitive caution is wisdom rather than fear. To know how and when to use the word fear is extremely important. We may be using it incorrectly. The word itself stimulates an association of emotions and ideas which create negativity and generate inhibitions. Thus, one causes misery and suffering for oneself. Can there be fear of death? Do we know what death is? What dying is? Is it the idea of death that frightens us? The word and its associations? One knows intellectually that death is a necessary part of life, just as necessary as birth. So how can we fear it? Is it fear of leaving the known, not actually fear of death? Fear of being suddenly cut off from those we love, from home, the dogs, the cats, the furniture, the knowledge, and the experiences? This would imply that fear of death is an emotional resistance to a natural law, and this also is not fear. There is an intellectual understanding of the fact and an emotional resistance to that fact. To understand intellectually is one thing, to totally accept what is understood is quite another. Without that wholehearted acceptance, there can never be peace or true relaxation. Death stands for the unknown. And how can we have fear of the unknown? There might even be adventure in it. Adventure, such as Socrates felt when a cup of poison was administered to him. He carefully observed the effects of the poison because he wanted to learn what it was to die. To learn to live and to learn to die, that is the privilege of human beings. Let us look at fear in human relationships. We cannot live without each other. We feel lonely, yet when we are together, we are afraid of one another. What is that fear? If a child has been brought up with one or both parents of an extremely dominating nature, dictating everything, constantly scolding, condemning, and criticizing, the child may lack self confidence, feeling that nothing he does is ever right. He may lack assurance at school, and when he's grown, that inhibition is biological. He will be afraid to meet people and expect to be rejected. This could be called fear, created by the atmosphere in which the child grew up. This fear could also be prenatal, even from the moment of conception. If one parent enters the sexual relationship desiring to dominate or possess the other, then the metabolism and psychology of that other person begins to shrink. The quality of a child's consciousness is determined to a great extent at the moment of conception. Wow. An inhibition so instilled could be called fear. The child is really frightened, not naturally, but with a kind of sickness for which others are responsible. There may not be this handicap, but ambitious people are also afraid to displease. Such a person manipulates his behavior to ensure the goodwill of another, is always afraid, cannot meet people spontaneously, is always busy calculating what the reaction of the other may be. That would be fear, although he would not see it as such. Ambition makes you aggressive on one hand and a coward on the other. Do we trust ourselves only when others approve what we are doing? Do we fear the disapproval that may come? I do not want their disapproval, therefore I follow them. Is that it? Acknowledgement, agreement, approval are not bad things. But if, for the sake of these, I manipulate my behavior, then I am losing freedom. Living in this consumer civilization, with everything organized, standardized, even regimented from childhood, one does not trust one's own sensitivity, sensibility, intellect, or decisions, because everything comes as a finished product, like instant coffee. Clothes are ready made. Food is ready made. We can buy anything. We even have ready made meditations and enlightenments. All the nonsense we have created in the name of religion and spirituality. One has not even had the education to reason things out for oneself, to take questions to their logical conclusion, understand them, and then live that understanding. To reason things out for oneself and to hold fast to that understanding. That is life. That is living. Yet one is afraid to do that because of one's upbringing in this society. If one lived one's understanding quite naturally, choicelessly, not as a sacrifice or sign of martyrdom, where then is isolation? You may be alone, but you're not lonely because you're surrounded by life. The trees are as important as human beings. Are they not fellow beings who share life with us? Are not the lakes, the hills, and the mountains fellow inhabitants of this planet? Even if you want to be lonely, you cannot, for there is life everywhere. You carry the knowledge and experience of all humanity. All the energies existing in the cosmos are within you. You are a condensed cosmos yourself. So how can you be lonely and isolated? You create isolation when you withdraw intentionally for some selfish purpose. Perhaps I do not like to meet people, so I withdraw. When there is intentional, systematic, organized withdrawal due to religious, political, economic, or ethnic preferences and prejudices, then that withdrawal results in isolation. But when you stand up for the understanding that has taken place in you, then there is no isolation, though there may be solitude or aloneness. Isolation seems to be intentionally brought about by emotional idiosyncrasies. I want to do these things as I want them and when I want them. Therefore I cannot live with others. One does not like to have the austerity of order in daily living, so I shall sleep when I want to sleep and as long as I want to sleep. I shall eat whenever I feel like eating, without discipline or order. I'm afraid of living with other people because living together might mean I have to discipline myself, and I do not want that. Because of the fear of discipline or order, which are part of social life, one withdraws into isolation. But in isolation, there's no life at all. Such a withdrawal may be an escape, but it's not living. In the name of religion and spirituality, thousands withdraw from social responsibilities and take refuge in the Himalayas in India, but the quality of their consciousness is not changed. They still suffer from anger and jealousy. Escaping into isolation is one thing, aloneness is quite another. Aloneness is when you are among people, but you do not depend on anyone, either emotionally nor intellectually. You live with them, share your life with them without any dependency. You cling to no one, nor create an authority out of anyone. This is renunciation, living and sharing with others, yet free of dependency. Dependency has two forms. One is domination. Unless you have someone to dominate, you feel restless. If there are no humans around you, you can have cats or dogs to cuddle or banish to a corner when you feel like it. The need for attachment is gratified through animals. The speaker once witnessed a fight between a husband and wife over a dog. The couple later divorced, and the issue was the dog. There is so much sorrow in the heart about the miserable plight of human beings that there is no time to criticize or condemn. Another form of dependency is the chronic disease of expectation. You expect that the other person uh, or partners will behave according to your wishes, your norms and criteria. You do not dominate overtly, but inwardly, psychologically, expecting them to fulfill your desires and meet your standards. You bind them with your expectations. Surely relationship is not putting fetters on the feet of another. Relationship is the joint adventure of living together in full freedom and love, meeting life's every moment, sharing the pain and the pleasure. This is what we have to learn. Dependency spoils the joy of love and sharing. If I should disagree with someone in the family or organization, honesty and courtesy demand that I say it to them. Look, this is the point where I seem to disagree with you. Let us talk it over. This is an acceptable way of sharing differences. We may still conclude that we disagree, perhaps 1 point out of 10, so we decide to ignore that 1 point and cooperate in the areas of agreement. The disagreement may then wither away. If we were to emphasize that single disagreement to the point where we couldn't work together, then, I think, human society would become impossible. Should the disagreement really be fundamental with no compromise possible, we must decorously agree to the parting of ways. This can take place with goodwill and affection, without bickering, bitterness, or insulting one another. I turn away, and that is not isolation. Am I afraid to turn away from one person, or 10, or 10,000? Life is too precious to waste a single moment in the luxury of nourishing fear. We have barely 100 years to live. Out of that, 88 hours a day, one third of our life, will be spent in sleep. The first 10 years are in childhood play, the last 10 or 15 basking in old age. There is no time to waste in pampering the reactions of the ego. What we generally call fear is the reaction of the ego and its unwillingness to accept facts as they are. Life is not made to order. It is, what it has been, and what it shall be. It is the cosmic dance of movement, innumerable energies acting upon one another, interacting with each other. Yet, in spite of that complexity, it is a benediction to be alive. We have seen that the Industrial Revolution created a society, a culture in which things were organized. It was looked upon as a sign of progress, as welfare, which took away initiative and the reasoning out of things from the individual. It is not only in affluent countries that this has happened. In schools and colleges in a poor country like India, you will find that the students do not study the full 12 months. For 1 month only, they take published books, guides, and notes so that they can answer the question papers. They think going to school is just for passing examinations, not for studying and learning. They come out of universities intellectually ill equipped. They just cannot reason things out, let alone have the understanding we've been talking about. They cannot even think academically or theoretically. They want to run away from reason, rationality, and go back to some primitive way, back to the impulsiveness in the name of freedom. The human race has handicapped itself by too much organization on the psychological level, by capitalism, socialism, communism, organized religions, and the ever widening powers of the state. Because, in a way, we are crippled, there is a revolt against this whole civilization and culture. As a race, we are proceeding towards a post-industrial culture, where organization for its own sake will have no value. Human beings will rise up for their freedom, none coming between them and the divine. No one, no middleman or agent between producer and consumer. No one, not even the state, between teacher and student. We are moving towards a new era of society based on freedom and friendship, not on comparison, competition, aggression, and violence. The motivations are going to change. The dynamics of relationship will change along with revolution in consciousness. And here ends this chapter on fear and isolation. And the change that she sees coming. So I hope you enjoyed. I wish you a great day. Bye for now.